The phone call that changed everything. It was the biggest day of his year. The stage lights were already warm, humming above a giant black curtain. Outside the auditorium, a sea of people buzzed like static. Journalists clutched their microphones, cameras blinked red, and thousands of viewers around the world waited behind glowing screens. It was the day of the tech summit, the global event Sundar Pichai had prepared for all year. But Sundar wasn't on stage. He was sitting in the back hallway, staring at his phone. His hands were shaking. A missed call from home. His mother's number. He stared at the screen, then pressed call. The phone rang only once. His younger sister's voice came through, choked and cracking. Amma fainted. She's in the hospital. And just like that, the noise faded. The cameras, the people, the summit, it all disappeared. Only the phone in his hand mattered. They told him it was serious. They told him he needed to come. But how could he leave? How could he walk away from the biggest stage in the tech world, with tens of millions waiting, cameras rolling, reporters ready to dissect every word he said? The event was named after him. They were calling it Pichai's Leap. 1,000 people waited outside. Hundreds were already seated. But he stood up slowly, took a deep breath, and whispered into the phone. "I'm coming." He didn't even tell the board. He didn't say a word to the event staff. He walked straight past security, through a back exit and into the silent air of a California morning. As the driver pulled up, Sundar's mind wasn't on business, or reputation, or headlines. It was 1985 again. He was 10 years old, sitting beside his mother on the floor of their small Chennai home. She was teaching him how to do long division. She didn't have a college degree, but she knew how to guide him, with patience, with love, with quiet belief. And now, she needed him. On the flight to India, he didn't sleep. He barely blinked. The world outside the window was a blur of clouds and light, but inside him the past was playing like an old movie. He remembered the time his mother walked 3 miles in the heat to find a second-hand physics book for him. He remembered how she sold her gold bangles to pay for his engineering exam fee. He remembered her hands, always busy, always giving. Now she lay in a hospital bed. When he landed, there were people at the airport, cameras again, flashing lights, reporters shouting questions. They had no idea why he was there. He kept walking. No words. Just a face carved by worry. Outside the hospital, he saw his sister. She didn't say anything either, just nodded and pointed upstairs. He stepped into the hospital room. His mother looked smaller than he remembered, weaker. But she was awake. When she saw him, her eyes filled with tears. "Why are you here?" she whispered. "You had something big today." He knelt beside her, took her hand. "Nothing's bigger than this." And for a long time they said nothing more, just silence, just fingers wrapped tight, just love, plain and powerful. But the story doesn't end there, because what happened next, the call he got while sitting in that hospital room, changed everything. It wasn't just about family anymore. It was about his past, a secret, something he thought he'd buried forever, and now it was coming back. The stranger in the hallway, the hospital walls were white but not clean. The paint was peeling in the corners and the air smelled like antiseptic and silence. Sundar sat by his mother's bed, listening to the rhythm of the machines around her. She had fallen asleep again, her breathing slow and steady now, but each inhale felt like a small miracle. For the first time in decades, Sundar felt small. Not the kind of small that comes from failure or fear, but the kind of small that happens when you are face to face with something bigger than you. Life, loss, love, all those things the world forgets when it's busy chasing headlines and valuations. But here, none of it mattered. Not the summit, not the stock price, not the glowing reviews or angry tweets. Only this room, only her. He leaned back in the old wooden chair, worn down by years of visitors with the same hope in their hearts, that someone they loved would open their eyes and say something beautiful. A nurse walked in, checked the IV drip, and walked out again. Sundar didn't look up. He was lost in thought, not the kind filled with numbers and future plans, but the kind that opens doors you tried to keep locked. And then his phone buzzed. A single message. No name. You should have told her the truth before it was too late. He stared at the screen. His heart thudded once. Heavy. There was no number. No contact saved. He stood up slowly, stepped outside the hospital room and looked down the hallway. The corridor stretched long and dim, a line of pale lights flickering above. No one was there. He walked to the nurse's station. Did anyone ask for me? He said quietly. The nurse looked up, confused. No, sir. Just family earlier. And doctors. He nodded and walked away. But something in him had already started shifting. Something cold, something forgotten. He walked to the end of the hallway and leaned against the wall. He remembered a time long ago when he wasn't Sundar Pichai, the CEO. He was just Sundar, the boy with second-hand shoes and too many questions. His mother had always called him Kanna, her little eye. To her, he was never the boy with answers. He was the boy who needed protection from the weight of the world, and he had lied to her. Not in words, not directly, but by hiding something. Years ago, during his early days at the university in Kharagpur, there had been an accident. Not the kind with blood and sirens. A different kind. A mistake. A betrayal. And a promise he made to someone he never thought he'd see again, until that morning, when he received the message. He opened his phone again, stared at the message. He tried to ignore the memories clawing their way back. The boy in the library, with the broken glasses, the exam paper that vanished, the night Sundar stood at the edge of his future and watched someone else fall. He had told himself it wasn't his fault, but that wasn't the whole truth. A door creaked behind him. He turned. A man was standing there, older with thin shoulders and eyes that held too many nights without sleep. Sundar didn't recognize him at first, but then the man spoke. You left him behind, he said. Sundar froze. The hallway seemed to stretch longer, darker. Who are you? Sundar asked, his voice lower now. I'm his brother, the man said. The boy who was supposed to top the class, the boy who trusted you. The man stepped forward. And now my mother is dying too. But she doesn't have a son on magazine covers. She has memories of a boy who never came home. Sundar couldn't speak. The man didn't wait for a response. He handed Sundar a small envelope, yellowed with time, and turned away. No more words. Just footsteps fading down the hall. Sundar stood there for a long time, the envelope in his hand, the weight of years pressing down on his shoulders. Inside the envelope was a photograph. Two boys, laughing. One with a hand on the other shoulder, and on the back in faint pencil, just 4 words. Brothers, even if forgotten. He stared at the photo and a deep ache pulled at his chest. Not because he had been caught, but because he knew. It was true. And now, as his mother lay sleeping behind the door, the past was awake, and it was coming for him. The letter he never sent. The envelope sat on the windowsill of his hotel room, soft and bent at the corners like it had been folded and unfolded too many times. Sundar hadn't opened it again since last night. He didn't need to. The image of the 2 boys, frozen in a moment of laughter long gone, had etched itself into his mind like it had always been there, waiting for its turn to speak. Outside, the city of Chennai moved like it always had. Scooters weaving through, traffic like thread through fabric, vendors shouting over the horns, dust rising into the thick air. The same sounds he had grown up with. But now it all felt different, quieter somehow. Like the world knew something had shifted inside him. His mother was still asleep in the hospital. They said she was stable now, still weak but awake. Her hands had been cold when he left that morning. He kissed her forehead before he walked out. She smiled faintly and whispered something so soft he almost didn't hear it. You always come back. But that wasn't true. Not always. Not when it mattered most. He looked at the envelope again, then at his old phone, the one he had asked someone to bring from his house, the one he hadn't touched in years. The screen was scratched, the buttons worn. It still had the cracked photo of his parents on the back, sealed in a plastic case. He turned it on. It booted slowly, like waking from a long sleep. Inside were messages he hadn't deleted, voicemails, fragments of his younger self, and one draft, a message he had typed but never sent. The date was February 18, 1995. He remembered the day like a bruise. It was after the exam scandal, back when he was still a student, sharp and hungry and afraid. The boy in the photo, his name was Raghav, had found something he shouldn't have. A duplicate paper. A copy that matched Sundar's test word for word. Raghav had asked him quietly away from the others if it was a mistake. Sundar had said yes. He said he didn't know how it happened, but he did. It wasn't that he had cheated, not directly, but someone at the coaching center had offered him an early look, not the full test, just the structure, a few hints. He hadn't paid, he hadn't asked, but he had listened, and he had used it, because he thought everyone else was doing it too, but Raghav didn't. Raghav believed in the clean way, the hard way. He was from a family like Sundar's, maybe poorer, maybe tougher, but he carried his struggle with pride, not shortcuts. And after that day, Raghav disappeared, just stopped coming. No explanations, no calls. Rumors said he had failed. Others said he had dropped out. Some whispered that he was forced out. Sundar never tried to find out. He told himself he didn't have time, told himself he had to focus on surviving. But the truth was worse. He was ashamed. And now, all these years later, Raghav's brother had found him, handed him a photo like a mirror, left without a name, just pain. He opened the draft. Message on the old phone, it was only 2 lines. "I'm sorry, I never meant to hurt you, I didn't know how to say it then." He never sent it. He had told himself it was too late. But maybe too late wasn't the end. Maybe it was just the moment truth stopped waiting. He closed the phone and picked up the envelope again, held it in both hands. He thought of his mother, how she had always told him to walk through the world with open palms, not closed fists. "What's yours will stay," she used to say. "What isn't will teach you." His palms were open now, but they were also shaking. He needed to find Raghav, not just for apology, not just for peace, but because he couldn't carry this anymore. Not with cameras chasing him, not with millions watching, not with the people who mattered most slowly slipping away. He stepped outside the hotel, wrapped his scarf around his neck, and climbed into the auto rickshaw. It shook as it started, rattling down the narrow streets with a sound that brought back the memory of his first day at school, when his mother rode beside him, holding his tiny lunch tin in her lap. He went back to his old neighborhood. The building was still there, smaller than he remembered, older too, but familiar. He knocked on the door. An old woman answered. Her eyes were cloudy but kind. "Yes?" she asked. "I'm looking for someone," Sundar said. "Raghav." She looked at him for a long moment, then stepped back and opened the door. He stepped inside. The air was thick with incense and memories. On the wall there were photos. One of them was the same as the one from the envelope. The old woman turned slowly. "You're Sundar," she said, not as a question, as a fact. "Yes," he replied. His throat felt dry. "He waited for you," she said softly. "Years, but you never came." Sundar couldn't speak. The words hung in the air like smoke, and then she pointed to the back room. "He's here." He walked in slowly. The door creaked, and there, sitting in the corner by a broken window, was Raghav. Alive. But not the boy he remembered. Raghav looked up, and in his eyes, something lit up. Not anger, not relief. Something else. Something that would change everything. The room without light. The room was dim, lit only by a shaft of sunlight cutting through a gap in the curtain. It landed gently on a dusty table where an old transistor sat beside a stack of worn notebooks and a half-drunk glass of water. The smell in the room was a mixture of medicine, paper, and time, thick and slow as if the air itself remembered too much. Sundar stood at the doorway, frozen. Raghav looked up from where he sat on a faded wooden chair, his spine curved slightly, his eyes hollow with years that had passed without pause. He didn't speak. Not at first, he just stared, and for a long moment neither of them moved. Sundar had practiced this moment in his head for hours, maybe days, maybe years without knowing. The apology, the explanation, the truth. But now, as he faced the boy who once trusted him, now a man carved by silence, all those words broke apart in his throat. "Hi," Sundar finally said. It felt ridiculous, too small. Raghav blinked once, then leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. He didn't smile. He didn't frown either, just looked at him the way someone looks at a dream that stayed away too long. "I thought you wouldn't come," Raghav said, voice thin and quiet. "I almost didn't," Sundar admitted. "But I had to." Raghav nodded slowly. "They all forget," he said, eyes drifting toward the dusty window. "But you don't really forget, do you? Not the real things." Sundar stepped inside the room, closed the door gently behind him. He pulled up a stool and sat across from Raghav, the silence between them thick as wet cloth. "I was scared," Sundar began. "Back then, I didn't know how to fix it. I thought if I got far enough, high enough, it would disappear." Raghav let out a dry laugh. It wasn't cruel. It was tired. "We all thought you would become something big," he said, "but I didn't think you'd forget where you came from." Sundar looked down at his hands. "I didn't forget," he said. "I just buried it." Raghav nodded again, slow, like someone turning the pages of a heavy book. "You remember that night?" he asked. "The one before the exam?" Sundar nodded. "You told me not to use it. The notes. You said it would change me." Raghav smiled faintly, barely there. "I think it already had." And there it was. Not anger, not accusation, just truth. Just the weight of it, placed gently between them like something fragile. "I lost everything," Raghav said after a pause. "The seat, the scholarship, my father's respect. I had to leave school, worked with my uncle for a while, ended up here, taking care of Amma." He looked at Sundar then, more directly. "But that's not what hurt the most," Sundar swallowed hard. "What did?" "You never wrote," Raghav said. "Not even once." The words landed like a quiet punch, not loud but deep. Sundar felt them in his chest, his bones. "I wanted to," he whispered. "I even wrote something, but I didn't send it. I was ashamed." "That's the thing about shame," Raghav said. "It only grows in silence." They sat there for a long time, two men who had once been boys, now older, broken in different ways. "My mother's sick," Sundar said after a while. "That's why I came back." Raghav nodded. "Amma's sick too. That's why I never left." The irony hung in the air. Sundar, the man of global stages, had run from home. Raghav, the forgotten friend, had stayed rooted. One climbed the ladder, the other carried the weight. "Do you hate me?" Sundar asked, barely able to look him in the eye. Raghav didn't answer right away. Then softly, "I did. For a long time. But hate is like rust. It eats you more than the person you aim it at." Sundar felt a strange tightness in his throat. Like grief, but not just for what was lost, for what had never even had the chance to become. "Can I help you now?" he asked. "Anything. Money, doctors, anything you need." Raghav shook his head. "You can't buy the years back," he said, "and that's not what I need." "Then what?" Sundar asked. Raghav looked him in the eye. "Just the truth. No press, no posts, no cameras, just us, just the boy I knew." Sundar nodded. "Then let's begin there." And for the next hour, they talked. Not like two strangers, but like two mirrors, finally facing each other. They spoke of those days. The library windows that leaked in the rain, the chai stall where they used to split one cup between two, the dreams they had whispered under the stars, dreams of making something of themselves, of never forgetting each other. And then, just before Sundar stood up to leave, Raghav said something that stayed with him long after the door closed behind him. "You were always the one who could change things," he said. "But you ran from the mess, I stayed in it. Maybe that's what the world needs now, someone who doesn't run anymore." Outside, the air was cooler. The sun had shifted. The rickshaw waited at the corner, engine humming. Sundar stepped inside. Didn't look back. But in his heart, something had moved. Something had cracked and breathed and come alive. He looked down at his phone. Another message had come through. This one from the summit organizers. "We need you to return. Your absence is making waves. The board is worried. Investors are calling." He typed a single word in reply. Wait, because there was still one more person he had to face, and this time, he wouldn't run. The hand that shaped him, the hospital, was quiet when Sundar returned. It was late afternoon, and the halls carried that tired stillness hospitals have when the rush has passed, and only the steady beeps and whispers remain. He walked slowly, the weight of the visit with Raghav still pressing on his shoulders, not heavy in the way guilt used to feel. This was different. It was a quiet kind of weight, the kind that anchors a person, makes them walk straighter. See clearer, his mother's room was just as he had left it, but when he opened the door he saw something different. She was awake now, really awake. Her eyes followed him as he stepped in, and there was warmth in them, but also something else. A softness that came from years of watching her son become someone the world admired, and still knowing parts of him the world never would. He sat beside her again, took her hand gently. Her skin was cold, paper-thin, but the grip she gave him was real. Still strong. "Amma," he said softly. She smiled faintly. "You look tired." He let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "I saw someone today." She nodded slowly as if she already knew. "Raghav." Sundar blinked. "You knew?" She turned her head toward the window, the light catching the edge of her silver hair. A mother knows when her child leaves something behind. Even if the world claps for him, even if he smiles in every photo, a mother sees the part that stopped growing. He said nothing, because there was nothing to say. "Not yet," she continued, her voice slow and measured. "You were always my quiet one. You carried everything inside. You didn't cry when you scraped your knee, didn't shout when someone pushed you in the market. But you came home that night years ago after the exam. You didn't eat, didn't speak, and the next morning you left earlier than usual." "I couldn't tell you," Sundar whispered, "because you thought I'd be ashamed." He nodded. She turned back to him then. Her eyes, though tired, held no judgment. Only love. Only that deep, endless pool of a mother's understanding. Something not learned, not taught, just born with. "I would never be ashamed of you," she said, "but I would have helped you carry it. You didn't have to carry it alone." His eyes stung. He had stood in rooms full of the brightest people in the world, answered questions from governments, overseen projects that shaped the future of billions. But nothing had ever made him feel as small, or as human, as sitting beside the woman who raised him and hearing those words. "I've spent so long trying to prove I was worthy," he said, "worthy of where I came from, of you, of the sacrifices." "You didn't need to prove anything," she replied. "You just needed to be honest with yourself." He looked at her, really looked. There were lines on her face now, the kind that only come from years of worry, of waiting, of holding a family together with nothing but will and love. He remembered how she used to boil water before sunrise so he could bathe before school, how she packed his lunch in the same small box every day, folding the cloth with care like it was treasure, how she sat up during his board exams, even when her eyes could barely stay open. "You never asked for anything," he said. "Mothers don't ask," she said. "We give. But that doesn't mean we don't feel." A nurse came in to check the monitors, adjusting the wires gently. Sundar stood to give her space. His mother closed her eyes for a moment, and he watched her chest rise and fall, slow and shallow. Outside, the sky had started turning orange, the sun dipping behind the city's crowded skyline. When the nurse left, Sundar sat down again. "I've been asked to return," he said. "To the summit. They say my absence is causing concern." His mother didn't open her eyes. "Do you want to go?" He hesitated, then answered truthfully. "I don't know anymore." "Then don't decide today," she said. "Stay." And so he did. That night, he slept in a chair beside her. The first real sleep he'd had in days. No alarms, no phones, no meeting requests. Just the quiet hum of machines and his mother's breath beside him. He woke early, just before dawn, and found her already awake. "Come," she said. "Take me outside." "Amma, I'm not asking to run a marathon, just the terrace." He laughed gently. "Still stubborn. Always." She smiled. He helped her into a wheelchair, careful with every movement. The nurse followed, behind as they moved slowly through the hallway, up the ramp to the terrace where the city met the sky. It was still. Peaceful. Only the sounds of birds and the quiet buzz of a waking world below. "Look at that," she said, pointing toward the horizon. He looked, and something in him shifted again. "You see all of this?" she asked. "The noise, the stories, the dreams. It all means nothing if you forget who you are." Sundar nodded. "Don't chase what the world claps for," she said. "Chase what keeps you awake at night. Chase what matters when everything else fades." He turned to her. "I think I finally understand." She smiled, but then her hand trembled, just slightly. He caught it quickly, called for the nurse. The machines started beeping again. Panic rose in his chest, and in that moment, between the sunrise and the alarms, he realized something terrible. He had come back just in time, but maybe not enough time. And as they rushed her back down to the room, as nurses moved quickly and doctors shouted instructions, Sundar stood frozen again, not in fear, but in helplessness. Because this time, no amount of intelligence could solve it. No connection, no board, no title could protect her now. And outside, his phone buzzed again. Another message. "We can't wait anymore. The summit must begin. Where are you?" He stared at the screen, then looked at the closed door to his mother's room, and without hesitation, he made his choice. Again. But what he didn't know, not yet, was that someone had filmed the moment on the terrace. Someone had uploaded it, and in a matter of hours, it would go viral. Not because he said anything, not because he made a speech, but because of how he looked at her. And the world would finally see the version of Sundar they had never seen before. Not the CEO, not the innovator, just a son. The moment that stopped the world, the hospital room was filled with the low hum of machines and the soft rustling of fabric. Sunlight filtered through the curtain, landing gently on the edge of the bed where his mother lay resting, her chest rising and falling in slow, uncertain rhythm. Sundar sat close, one hand wrapped around hers, the other holding a damp cloth he used to cool her forehead every few minutes. He had not left this room. In 20 hours, the summit had already begun. The stage had been filled, the lights had turned on, the keynote screen had loaded with his face on the cover. Executives whispered behind the curtain, wondering who would replace him. Reporters speculated. Headlines popped up by the minute. Tech leader missing from global summit. Board under pressure as CEO fails to appear. Silence from Sundar. Mystery or message. But in this quiet room, the world's noise could not reach him. His world was here. By her bedside, the nurse entered softly. "Sir?" she whispered. "Would you like to rest for a bit? We can stay with her." Sundar shook his head without looking up. "I'm all right." He wasn't all right. He was tired, hungry, unsure. His eyes stung, his back ached, and he hadn't looked at a single email since yesterday morning. He hadn't spoken to a board member, hadn't read a brief, hadn't opened his calendar. But, for the first time in years, he wasn't trying to manage anything. He was just trying to be present. He thought about all the hours he had spent in boardrooms, all the time spent preparing for product launches, interviews, global decisions, every second tracked, every thought optimized. He had built a career out of solving problems, but this wasn't a problem to be solved. It was a goodbye, waiting to happen, maybe not now, maybe not today, but close. He could feel it in the air, in the silence that hovered over her breathing. He squeezed her hand gently. "Amma," he said softly. "I'm still here." She didn't open her eyes, but her fingers moved slightly, the smallest movement, but enough to let him know she heard him. Then suddenly, his phone buzzed again. This time a message not from the summit, from his assistant. "You need to see this." He opened the link, a video, no title, no edit, just raw footage. He tapped play, and there it was in the hospital terrace just a day earlier. The sun rising, the city behind them, and him holding his mother's hand as she pointed to the sky. They were alone, or so he thought, but someone had recorded from the hallway window. Just a minute long. It showed nothing dramatic. No speech, no crying, just a son listening to his mother. Just quiet. And that quiet had traveled across the world. Millions had watched it. Millions had shared it. People didn't write essays in the comments. They wrote what they saw. This is what love looks like. No CEO moment will ever matter more than this. He showed up when it counted. I wish I had done the same before my mother passed. And the view count kept rising. In boardrooms, in classrooms, in offices around the world, people paused. Not because they were told to, but because something about the moment asked them to stop, asked them to remember what really matters. The summit, ironically, was no longer about artificial intelligence or the next breakthrough in technology. It had become a conversation about humanity, about presence, about priorities. And it was his silence, not his words, that started it. The board issued a statement later that day, calling his decision a personal matter deserving of respect. The organizers of the summit played the terrace video during the closing ceremony, unplanned. No music, no voiceover, just the sound of wind and birds and the city waking up behind him. And when it ended, the entire room stood up in silence. No claps, no music, just stillness. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Sundar stayed. He fed his mother soup, told her stories about their old home, reminded her of the time she had chased him down the street with a sandal because he broke the radio. She smiled at that, barely, but it was there. He told her about Raghav, about the apology, about the photo, about the years they had both lost. And she looked at him and said only one thing: "You came back." And those 3 words healed something in him that no award ever could. A week later, when she was strong enough, he wheeled her out into the hospital garden. The sun was warm again, the breeze gentle. She held a small flower in her hand, a marigold someone had left in a pot nearby, and she pressed it to her nose. He sat beside her and watched her breathe, watched her live. And in that moment, he didn't miss the summit. He didn't miss the spotlight. He didn't miss anything at all because he was exactly where he was meant to be. And for the first time in a long, long while, he felt whole.